and we are asking and learning some new things about U.S. immigration. Today's episode is going to be a little bit unique because we're going to attempt and share Visas.ai's backend from John's side. That would be wonderful. And that way we can kind of have an idea a little bit about what goes on behind the scenes. So I'll give you the mic over to you, John. Let us know what's been going on in your world, and let's talk about P visas and visas.ai.
Awesome. Thanks, Pierre. Good to see you, Yesh. The PVs is very close to my heart because the reason I got into immigration um, 30 years ago, which was months after I started practicing law, was because I was a rugby player. And rugby is a sport that was not invented in the United States. It's a British sport. It was invented in England. And a number of sports England took around the world when it had the British Empire, right? So sports like cricket, soccer, which they call football, and rugby were some of the main sports. And you'll see the countries that that England colonized are really good at it. So rugby's the national sport of New Zealand, South Africa, Wales, Fiji, and it's a main sport. It's the main contact sport. It's the American football for the rest of the world, right? So where we play American football, other countries play rugby, like France, who just won the gold medal in the Olympics in rugby, and New Zealand won the gold medal in the Olympics for women. And so I was in New Zealand on a tour, and rugby was the last major sport to go pro. It remained an amateur sport, and it had always maintained its amateur status for years and years in the way that the Olympics were amateur back in the day, right? So rugby players often learn the sport at private schools in England. Rugby was a private school in England, and it was called rugby football because football was what they called soccer. And a goalie named William Webb Ellis picked up the soccer ball or football and ran down the field, and that's how rugby football was invented. So it was invented out of private schools. It was then played in universities or colleges, and then rugby players were often higher level gentlemen, really, and they like to keep it that way. Soccer became the working man sport, and it went professional, and then it outgrew rugby. It was not the predecessor to rugby in all the same ways, but it was a predecessor professionally to it in others. And so soccer became much more popular and played, by the working class, and rugby was played by the upper class in England. Now, that wasn't the same in the rest of the world. New Zealand, it's very much a laborer's game. The Pacific Islanders, Fiji, Tonga, Samoa, are not, they're not gentlemen. They're the working class of those countries. Wales as well. So rugby went into this deal, and then when all these other sports were going pro or had been pro for decades, rugby tried to cling to that, and it finally gave in when apartheid ended in South Africa, because South Africa was really, really good at rugby. And now they started playing the rest of the world. And because they couldn't play the rest of the world, they started becoming professional. New Zealand then said, hey, these guys are pro. We need to be pro. And this all broke around when I was on tour with a U.S. team in New Zealand. And when we came back, we decided to try the first green card for a professional rugby player, and we did it. He played for the U.S. national team. He was a New Zealander. And then from that, I grew my immigration practice, right? I started representing rugby players around the country because if you're licensed in any state, you can practice in other states. And because that first player was an Aspen, it soon grew into skiing, right? And now we represent athletes in 50 different sports. We have them in lots of major sports, lots of NBA players. It's really cool to watch the Olympics and see your clients there. Lori Markkinen, who played for Finland, client of ours. It was just a lot of fun to see that. Tennis players, Petra Kvitova carried her flag out in the last Olympics for the Czech Republic. So we probably have, a dozen or more athletes in various sports in the Olympics, including the head coach, the only woman that coached a women's team in the Olympics for America, got the bronze for our country, and one of my favorite clients Emily Bidewell in that. So that's my backing into this visa. Well, one of the visas that's the non-immigrant visa for athletes is the P visa. And we've been doing that for 30 years as well. We've done P visas for rugby players. We've done them for skiers. We've done them for race car drivers, tandem paragliders, monster truck athletes, tennis players, all sorts of different people on the P. And I want to take you guys through that, through our technology, if that's okay, Pierre, because that's a good segue.
That's a wonderful segue, John. Yes,
Okay.
please.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen.
I like that we're more hands-on today. That would be
Yeah.
really nice. Putting all the thoughts into.
Also, monster truck athletes.
Yeah, I've
They're
never heard
called
of
pilots, not drivers. And basically, they're paid about $1,000 a competition to get into a car wreck with a truck that's 10 feet off the ground with an airplane engine.
Yes, that's why they're called pilots.
Yeah, that
I'm
sounds like
learning
fun,
something
doesn't
new
it?
today.
Yeah. And so if you win, you get like $1,500. So second through 20 or whatever, they just get $1,000 and they get to enjoy their car wreck that they just had. So yeah, interesting.
So John, we see you now. Yeah, we see your screen. And attorney Ashley Morin is here with us. Welcome, Ashley. We're talking about P visas today.
Hi,
And
sorry, I had a call go over.
thanks for being here. Just a heads
Okay,
up.
so I'm just going to go to our dummy version of this so that I'm not showing anybody's confidential information. So we call this Liberty. This is where our attorney Betsy Ross from the law firm Liberty Law Firm is here. And I'm just going to take you quickly through how Betsy would set up a P visa quickly. She'd go here to new lead and she'd go, okay, what's your name? And the guy would say pro athlete. So she'd write down pro athlete's name. Put in pro athlete's email if you want it, send him an invitation if needed. And then if she had represented a team before, she could find it here through the organizations. I'm sorry, for existing. You could list all her organizations. But we don't have one. Let's say that pro athlete. What kind of sport's pro athlete going to be in, guys? Anybody want to throw out a sport?
Monster truck.
Monster truck. Okay, so let's say that he's going to work. This is not the official name, but for Monster Jam, and that Cookie Monster. If you guys didn't know that, Cookie Monster is the owner of Monster Truck Competitions. So we would have Cookie at Monster Truck Comp.co. Hopefully that's not somebody's real email address. And then we would send that invitation to Cookie. So he'd say, okay, I want to determine whether pro athlete's going to get a P visa for me. Okay, and we're going to select. I'm going to select it under the Major League Rugby competition because that's the one the most advanced one we have in this dummy one. So we can customize our strategy questions to various things, but I don't have one for Monster Truck, so I'm gonna use rugby, and I'll show you why. So then we go here to pro athlete. We're going up here to strategy session, and I'm gonna pick pro athlete, and I'm gonna do his strategy session now, and I'm gonna go down here to this P visa. Okay. All right. So we can put notes in here. Pro athlete is what country's pro athlete from?
Does it have to be from a
Australia?
specific country?
Australia.
Australia.
Well, everybody is from a specific country.
Right.
It
But for
doesn't
the P
matter.
visa, their
No.
eligibility, this is a good time to ask.
Yeah,
That,
no, that's a good question. So while some visas are based on treaties like the E3 for Australian professionals or the TN for Mexicans and Canadians, or the E1s and twos for the 33 countries that have treaties, those are specific to countries, but most visas aren't specific to countries. The P1's just for professional athletes. Okay, so pro athletes from Australia, and I could write whatever notes. This is a good case. Um, uh, we are ready to proceed. This will be the notes I can tell my team after I take my strategy session. Next steps, send contract to Cookie Monster to start process for pro. All right, so the P1 visa, I'm going to put in here there's a P1A and a P1B. The P1A is for athletes. The P1B are for entertainers. All right, so I'm not going to deal with that, but he's going to be a professional monster truck pilot. I think that's what they call him. And the beneficiary, again, is pro athlete. All right. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll just ask them, tell me a little about your background. So you guys want to throw out pro athlete's background in Australia? What are some of the things that pro athlete's done as a monster truck driver?
We're just making this up?
We're making it up.
Okay.
Is
What'd you
there
say,
like
Peter?
Indy 500 or something for them?
Monster trucks don't have the Indy 500, but you want to just say that he won a major competition like that?
Yeah.
Okay. So pro athlete won the, let's call it the Aussie Monster Truck Jam. Say that was January 1st, 2023. Okay. What else is Aussie, or what else has pro athlete done? Any ideas what a monster truck driver from Australia would have done in his career?
let's see.
Maybe be part of the national team.
Okay. Pro athlete was selected to Australia national monster truck team for the World Championships.
How about they held the record for the highest monster truck jump for Australia in 2016.
Okay. Pro athlete holds the record for highest jump
Yes. And
a monster truck in 2016. Okay. So who might that get the attention of? Who has records for things?
well, they have a lot of press that would get attention on him and would write about him if he
Press
won all these
on
things and accomplishments.
records, achievements. Okay.
He's
How
been
about
on the Sydney Morning Herald.
Okay.
also did a segment on him on that very funny Australia morning show.
Segment on Pro or Mr. Athlete on national, how about let's say ABC, Australian Broadcasting Company morning show. Good morning, Australia. Okay. Okay. Anything else? Okay.
I think everything looks good as it is. Seems
Let's
to have
take
a
it
good
ahead.
profile so far.
So as we go through here, we want their activities while in the U.S., right? So that's important for the P visa as opposed to the O. I'm going to compare this to the O as we go through there. So the P visa, you have to be competing at the highest level of the sport. And there's a couple of things that go there. So there's individual Ps, right? And an individual P has to have international recognition. We'll talk about that. Then there are members of teams that can also have international recognition. But if that team competes in a competition of 6 or more teams and has combined revenues of $10 million annually, then they're considered a pro athlete, and you don't have to be internationally recognized. So the New York Mets are in Major League Baseball. They're in a competition of many more than 6 teams, and their revenue generation is much more than 10 million a year. So the New York Mets if they wanted to hire any of the 4 of us to be a professional baseball player, and they wanted to pay us the money to do it, then we could take that job and get a P visa. Even though we're not internationally recognized baseball players. I'm assuming that for the 4 of us, but I know I'm not. But if it's a team sport of less than the 10 million per year or less than the 6 teams and 10 million, then they would have to show they're internationally recognized. Or if they're individual athletes, they would have to show that. So we can look at that. So right now, the activities in the U.S. might be he is going to compete in, I think maybe it used to be called Feld Motorsports Monster Jam competition. Okay, and I'll make a note. This is owned by Disney Entertainment, which is weird that Cookie Monster got involved. I think they're rivals. And is the highest level of pro monster truck competition in U.S. and the world. Okay. So this is an international competition, and he's going to be in that. All right. His itinerary is going to be 3-year contract. To compete in all Monster Jam competitions in U.S. and abroad, and train in off season. All right. So a technique here is you'll have the contract, and sometimes those the schedule. Sometimes those schedules don't release but once a year. Even the NFL doesn't do theirs more than 1 year out. So what you do is you take the schedule that they have, and then you say the next 2 years are going to be very similar if not, or virtually identical, right? They'll have, the same types of tournaments in the same types of locations. And this is a 3-year stint and that sort of stuff. And that typically works, right? So you can do 3 years there. And then you can come in and out of the country. These are multi entry visas. So he can go out to do the international competitions. He can come in and out of the country while he's training in the off season and those sort of things. Then you can also file through an agent. So let's file through an agent. We do a lot of these through agents. An agent gives some freedom to these athletes. They can have more than one thing they're going to do. Say that he's in the international competition, but he's also sponsored by a tire company and a motor vehicle company like Ford or something, right? So he can get paid to do endorsement related things. It can only compete. He can't coach, right? We've actually argued that. We've had we used to do a lot of coaches, but the P visas really come down. Matter of fact, there was an AAO decision called the Matter of VLF, our law firm's Velie Law Firm, where we had been successfully getting coaches and then players training at clubs, in particular in tennis, visas, and they decided they wanted to deny it, and then they made it an adopted decision. So that because we were winning all of them, and then they narrowly went down to we weren't winning all of them. Then it got down to 50%. Then we changed it. It got back up to 100. Then it went back down, and then we couldn't get them approved. Then they adopted this petition saying, look, no coaching, even though the argument, and probably could take this to federal court, is that if somebody is doing something ancillary and related to the competition, it works. And they're allowing endorsement deals, right? So they're allowing these athletes to pitch Gatorade or the local car dealership. But coaching, I think, is much more closely related than to being a salesman. But you're allowed to wear patches and do those things. You're not allowed to work in the company, but meet and greets and things like that can work. Okay, so if we want to do an agent petition, the agent can then be the petitioner, and then there would be contracts between and authorizations between each of what they call direct employers. So if one's Feld Motorsports, if the other one's Ford Motor Company, if another one is Firestone Tire Company, you'd have contracts between the athlete. It can't just be letters. And then on that contract or in a separate document, it would say they authorize the agent. So we're going to have big agency, LLC, and in the team details, we would have Feld Motorsports, and let's just call them the Big Cookie. Big Cookie Monster Trucks team. Matter of fact, we could have all of that. So Feld Motorsports might be one form of monetization revenue. Big Cookie Monster Trucks team, another one. Ford Motor Company could sponsor them, and then what do I say? Firestone Tires. Okay, and then we would have the contact there. So here's the P visa criteria. So one is that they've competed in a major league already. So he hasn't competed in the monster truck yet. Well, actually, let's say he has. Let's say he's been competing in Australia and he did there. So he was in Monster Jam competition in the Australian let's call it the national. We'll call it the Sydney Monster Jam in 2023, and then Sydney Monster Jam is one of the international tour stops for Monster Jam competition? We'd say there is an article in Monster Truck magazine titled Pro Athlete Wins Debut in Monster Jam. Actually, you do it like this. And put the title, the publication, January, December 25th. Big Christmas Day thing for Monster Jam. A lot of people don't know that. And by Nigel Smythe. Okay. All right. So we got the name of the magazine, name of the article, the date, and the author, which you want to do on all your things. National team. So Yes said that he's a member of the Australian team. Member of Australian national team in Monster World Championships. Okay, and then that was in 2023. All right, so this thing is they have to have competed on a national team in an international competition. You guys spell championships right, but what does that mean? So it obviously means senior professionals. It is difficult sometimes if you do youth, if it's too young. In some of the ones we've seen, like under 20 World Cup in rugby has worked, under 18, under 17 hasn't, right? So the older, the better. But the under 20s are kind of college age kids. The under 18s are high school age kids. And so they don't always respect youth based. They never really respect amateur, but there's a gray area there on what is a national team. So obvious ones are Olympic teams, Pan American teams, Davis Cup in tennis, things like that. Anyway, that's what you do it. There would be some evidence. I won't go into that. Then another one is U.S. universities or college teams where they competed in international competition. So I don't think there's Monster Truck in college, and this guy was in Australia, so he didn't do it. But that is in a lot of sports, so that's a good one. Okay, so those are some of those. Then right here is the sponsor. So we would have the Ford Motor Company and all of that sort of stuff.
And John, sorry to cut you off, but we are over our time today. So if we can start wrapping up, I think this is going to be a multiple session, stream. And what I wanted to ask you is, can we go back to this one using visas.ai, or is this strategy only one time and that's it? Or can one go back to it and have it saved?
The great thing about this is that we send this strategy to the client. So we'll set it up. And this one, we didn't put the email in of Pro Athlete. We only put the email in for Cookie Monster. So Cookie Monster wants to know whether Pro Athlete's good enough to get a visa. It hasn't given him a job offer yet. And then we can send that just to them. And so Cookie will have his own, kind of employer portal, whereas Pro Athlete would have a different portal for his own. But if we send it to Pro Athlete 2, either one of them could go in and see these questions and answers. And this is really the evolution from the legal pad, right? Instead of writing these notes down, we're taking these notes. And if we say, because there's some other things here that Pro Athlete is ranked in Monster Jam, but we don't know what it is, I can leave in Monster Truck rankings. I can leave a note. Please obtain proof, right? And then they can go back and do that, and they can put it in. They can drop it in right there themselves, or they can put right here, pro monster truck world rankings and put a link in, right? www.link.com, right? And so this is a collaborative tool, Pierre. And so honors, we had our honors, we'd put those in, but this is where we go back and forth. And what's really cool, here's how we do it in our firm. So I'm the lawyer. That means I'm the strategic executioner. Ashley does that. Yesh does that. Lawyers are the ones that have this collaborative tool. And what we've done is we've taken out the strategic questions from the non-discretionary questions. Non-discretionary questions are what's pro athlete's middle name or date of birth or place of birth, right? That's not open to discussion. It's not open to discretion, right? It is what it is. And what the other platforms do is they just give you all these questions and they don't create strategic questions. These strategic questions don't go to forums. What they do is they go to our brief, right? And so our brief writes the story about why is pro athlete internationally recognized, or why is the pro Monster Jam a competition of 6 or more teams with over 10 million. How does it meet the law, right? And how does it support that with regulations or policy or case law and all that sort of stuff? That's how you win these cases. But also our technology allows you to upload documents, and it uses AI to parse the information from passports and previous forms and drop it in there to make it less painful to answer all those questions too. And then we assemble all that and we put it into our assembly station, and then we can ship it out to our clients securely over the portal for signatures. And we can even put the whole petition together and have them there, look at it, sign it, re-upload it, and have it there for perpetuity. But really what you asked about is they get to, after this initial strategy session, go back and look at it. And sometimes our clients aren't there yet, right? This guy's there, he's great, but maybe this would be a brand new guy. He just started his professional career. I would say, hey, go do 3 or 4 competitions. See how you do. Come back. Hey, I'm up for the national team, but they're not going to decide until, September. I'm like, okay, I'm going to load it in here. But if you get it, put it back, and then we'll have that, and we'll go from there.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So, I think this was a good intro to it, and we can keep using this and show you how we take this information, how we can create documents from it. And really, this is an awesome tool. And, over these things, like, for example, we have our descriptions here on it's training our team so that if we have term strategies, we can put them over here in winning strategies, and winning strategies can be for all sorts of things. Just looking at it, OOA right here is like team awards are acceptable in O1s and EB1s, right? And this is where an Olympic medalist was turned down by immigration, but the AAO, which is their appellate department, overturned them and say, hey, this guy he wasn't on the sidelines. He won the medal. He was in the relay. He should get it. And so we use these AAO decisions. We use policies. We use everything to support our arguments. And it also is great for our attorneys when they're doing strategy sessions to be able to be helped out a little bit while they're asking these questions.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for the introduction to the P visas, John. I think we're going to come back next week with a lot more questions. And
Great.
then, of course, Attorney Warren and Attorney Yesh, thank you so much for being here. I would just want to wrap up this week by making sure that I check in with Yesh, who's been here. Yesh, do you have any questions for John? Any thoughts about the P visa before we let you go?
No, I'm learning a lot. It's first, it's cool that they're called pilots instead of drivers.
Drivers, yeah.
You
Pilot.
wouldn't
That's
guess
because they
that,
have
yeah.
jet engines.
That's probably why.
Wonderful.
Yeah. I thought the same thing.
Well, that's
Thanks for
funny.
having me. I haven't done a lot of P's, so this was interesting.
Yeah.
But you do have a connection to motorsports.
I do.
Yeah. And I thought the nugget was that who had any idea that Cookie Monster owned a monster truck company? But it makes sense. I mean, it's in his family. I bet
It's a
a
lot of
long line
race.
of monsters have owned monster truck companies. This makes a lot of sense.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time. We'll see you next week and have a great weekend.